Hey everybody, welcome. It's Ty Hicks, results coach and national influence and leadership trainer. So excited to have you here today because we're going to be talking about how you can master any skill. Yeah, any skill whatsoever. Let me ask you, have you ever looked at some of these individuals that are top performers in the fields of athleticism, people who are, high performers with musical instruments, people who are titans of industry, and, have you ever started to wonder, how the hell do they do that? Is that something they're born with? Is it something innate? Is it something I could learn? Is mastering skills something that anybody could do? And I have the fortunate answer, which is yes. It is entirely possible for you to master whatever skill it is that you want to master. And these 6 steps are going to enable you to be able to chart that path to make it happen. So regardless of whether or not you're trying to, increase your business, if you're trying to master your health, if you're trying to master a specific craft or specific skill to aid you in growing your business, whatever the case is, okay, you can master it by following these 6 steps. So let's just dive right in and let me share with you some insights here that will help you move along the path of mastery faster. First of all, this may be something you've heard before, and that's great if you have, but what I wanted to do is just take a minute to briefly share with you the 4 phases of mastery so that you can get a sense of what you're going to be moving through as you're on your path to becoming a master in your specific chosen area. So the first phase of becoming a master is the phase where we're kind of bumbling through things. We call this unconscious incompetence. Now, the reason why we call this unconscious incompetence is because you are incompetent at, mastering the skill, at executing the craft, but you're incompetent in such a way where you don't even yet know what you are doing wrong. Okay, so that's why this is the very first phase. And that's very likely where you might be starting off at, if you're just beginning with your specific area of mastery. Now, if you've been doing this for a little while, you might be in one of these later stages. You might be in stage 2. Now, stage 2 is conscious incompetence. This is where we move out of the vein of being bad and not knowing why we're bad to being bad or not being as good as we want to be, but now knowing what we have to improve, or at least knowing some of what we have to improve. So that's a very, very significant step from phase 1. You might be frustrated in this first step, but here if you're in phase 2, you at least know what you have to improve and focus on. So that's a very valuable place to be. Now, step 3 is a really good place to be. This is conscious competence. So now you are actually executing the craft as you need to, but the thing is, as you're doing it, you have to be mindful as you are doing it. You have to be aware of each step that you're taking. You have to be aware of what is going to happen next, and you have to be kind of thinking about these sequences at a conscious level, right? You have to be actively engaged in the process. You have to be thinking mindfully as you navigate through your specific craft. So that's what we mean by conscious competence. You've got it figured out, but you have to think really hard about making sure that you get it figured out and make it happen how it's supposed to every single time. That's what we mean by conscious competence. Now, the final phase of mastery is the most exciting one, and this is what we call unconscious competence. This means that you execute it flawlessly, well, maybe not flawlessly, but you execute it extraordinarily, and you're able to do so without consciously thinking about how you're doing it, meaning that your level of muscle memory has been acclimated so much so to the fact of performing this craft that you just know what to do. Your body knows what to do before your mind even knows what is happening. That's where real mastery lies, and this is where we want to get you to eventually. Now, what's interesting about studying mastery, and by the way, I highly recommend the book Mastery by Robert Greene if you're looking for some additional content in this area, because he's a fantastic author, and what he does in that book is he uncovers sort of the thinking process that went into Einstein, as well as individuals who have, become masters in many different fields. Master chess players, individuals like Michael Phelps, right? People who have just become incredibly extraordinary in their specific fields. And this is one of the things that he talks about a lot, is that you might think that masters of their crafts are really in level 3 of conscious competence, where they're thinking through everything and they have to deliberately apply themselves, to make sure that the sequence happens as it's supposed to. But that's not the case. These individuals who've ascended to true mastery are able to do it without even thinking about it. And that's what is really exciting about this process, is we want to get you there. So let's talk about how we get you there. First of all, I wanted to share with you the cone of learning. So if you've ever seen this before, it's worth revisiting, but if you haven't seen it before, it's really important for you to understand. What this is meant to illustrate for you is how you best retain information. And this is going to be important as you specifically chart your path to mastery, regardless of whatever craft it is that you've chosen. So the basic essence of understanding what you're seeing on this graph is that the more passively we ingrain information, the less we actually ingrain it. And the more active we become in utilizing that information, the more it becomes a part of who we are. The more it becomes something that is retainable, something that we can retrieve at a later date, something that we can make active use of. This is what we might call you having a working knowledge of a specific set of ideas. So, what are the types of learning that cause us to have the least amount of retention? Well, it's the most passive forms. So if you just read, you're only going to retain about 10% of what you read after 2 weeks. So that's pretty terrifying. You're going to retain about 20% of what you hear. You're going to retain about 30% of what you see visually, 50% of what you hear and see combined together, 70% of what you say. So if you literally recall the information, that's why I highly recommend, if you are ever reading or listening to audiobooks, whenever you have an interesting idea, even after you read every paragraph, I recommend that you stop, pause, and re-say to yourself what it is that you just learned, because that's going to mean that you ingrain it at a much deeper level. Even if it will take you more time, it will save you time in the long run, because you're not going to have to be returning to material all the time. And then finally, 90% of what we learn by saying and doing is retained after 2 weeks. So ideally, what you need to take away from this is that if you want to retain information, if you want to make sure that new concepts that are exposed to you don't just rattle around in your head until they disappear, but instead become a part of who you are, then you have to get active with how you apply the information. You need to retain it, you need to say it, you need to speak it, you need to ideally fire the information off on as many different learning channels as you can. See it, hear it, say it, and then do it, and apply it immediately. That last one is going to be very, very critical as you ascend through the path of mastery. You're never going to become a master just becoming a student that's passively listening to things all the time. You've got to apply yourself actively, and that's the only way the skill becomes a part of your body, meaning that it's a part of your nervous system, and it's not something that you have to consciously conjure up and understand how to apply, but instead it's just something that you can use fluidly and apply in the specific moments when you need it. So I wanted to put this out there for you so that you can start to get a sense of how you're actually going to have to chart your specific path to mastery. All right, so let's talk about these 6 steps. So number 1, in terms of you ascending to the path of mastery, is you've got to get clear about what it is that you want to master and committed. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos, or if we've worked together one-on-one in a coaching capacity, you know how much I care about vision, meaning, do you have utter clarity on where it is that you want to go? Now, there's 2 very important reasons why I harp on this so much. The first is, if you don't know where you're going, how could you have any idea if you're getting closer to where you want to go in the first place? So we've got to get clear on that so that we have a measuring stick of our progress, and so that we at least have an intention that we can apply to the path that we're going to be navigating. Okay, that's number 1. The second key to getting clear about why what it is that we want to achieve, is because it gives you emotional juice. It makes you feel compelled. It gives you the urge to actually want to go after it and chase after it, and it's going to give you the stamina to keep after it even when you're discouraged, even when you're unsure if you're actually going to achieve what you want to achieve. This clarity of what you really want is going to make sure that you stay compelled. So that's why it's important to not just have clarity of saying, I want to be able to play the guitar very well, but maybe for you to be able to say, I want to be able to play a rock show and I want to be able to, just bring down the house. Okay, that is clear and it's compelling because it gives you a mental picture of something that you can get excited for, something that makes your mouth water a little bit, right? That's what's really important here. You don't want to have a dry vision for mastery. You want to have a real, alive, living, breathing picture in your mind of what you're going to do once you achieve mastery. Who are you going to serve? What contributions are you going to make? Because when you get clear on that, all of a sudden now you'll stay excited to actually keep moving towards it. That's what's really important. I love this quote by Michelangelo here as well, just to give you a sense of how much work is going to be involved in ascending to mastery, and to give you a sense that people are not innately born with these talents. I love this quote by Michelangelo. All right, so we've gotten clear and committed on where it is that you want to go. Number 2 now is going to be finding an experienced mentor or coach. Now, there is just simply no way to ascend the path of mastery the fastest unless you find an experienced coach who's going to help you get there. Am I saying that it's the only way? No, but I am telling you it is probably the difference between you spending, a couple thousand hours figuring out how to master your craft versus tens of thousands of hours. Because a coach is going to be able to help you learn what they've already learned. You don't have to learn from your mistakes. You can learn from their mistakes, and they're going to help you zero in on what to focus on. They're also going to be able to identify what those specific patterns are in your own performance that you may not even be conscious of, because you've got to have an extra layer of awareness in order to become effective and move to the next level of mastery. The coach is going to bring perspective, strategy, clarity, and direction to the table. And those are all things that are going to be vitally important in order for you to ascend your skills up to the next level. So who can you find that's already done what you want to do? That's a very important question for you to answer. Number 3, and a coach is going to help you do number 3, but what you really want to start to zero in on is identifying what the underlying principles are. Regardless of what specific craft it is that you need to master, there are going to be underlying principles that you've got to be able to master that are going to add an extra dimension to your entire path of mastery. So, for instance, in the field of guitar, now I don't play guitar, so I'm not exactly an expert in this area, but I'm confident that if we were speaking to somebody who was a master at guitar, they would be able to tell you, if you want to master guitar, there's probably 3 to 5 things that you've really got to get down, okay? And what you've got to get down is, they might say your chords, you've got to be able to get down your picking strategy, you've got to be able to, do 2 different things with both of your hands. They're going to be able to tell you what the 3 to 5 areas are that you've really got to zero in on. Now, one of the areas that I help coach people on is becoming a more effective influencer and persuader. And I can tell you that there are very key underlying principles to becoming a better persuader. For instance, you've got to become a master at building rapport with individuals. You need to understand how to reframe objections and be able to handle those. And finally, you've got to be able to understand the principle of leverage, meaning you've got to be able to understand what causes somebody to say to themselves in their mind, yes, I'm absolutely willing to take action, and how you can actually help empower them to get to that place. So there's really a couple key underlying principles that I can zero in on if I'm coaching somebody in that area, and I can tell how good they are in each one of those different areas. So if they're really good in one area but not great in another, I can help them zero in on that, because I know that once they've mastered those underlying principles, it all is going to weave together in a much more intricate and beautiful web of mastery. They're going to be able to make new connections in their mind as soon as they've got those underlying principles developed. So that's what you want to zero in on. If you're embarking into a completely uncharted territory trying to master something for the very first time, you need to do your research to try to figure out what are those underlying principles, what are the basic key skills that you need to have in order to become a master in that area. And if you zero in on those first, you're going to have a lot more clarity of direction. It's going to be easier for you to get a sense of how you're going to become a master at it. And it's going to just give you the sense of confidence and victory as you kind of chalk up those small wins of mastering those specific sub-skills, okay? So find those underlying principles. Now, step 4 is very important, and you might underestimate how important this is. What you need to do if you really want to become a master at a particular skill is you need to visualize yourself acting with mastery on a daily basis, at least once a day. Now, let me share a little anecdote for you to show you how important this is. Michael Phelps actually visualized and rehearsed the perfect swim lap in his mind perpetually. He did it during practice, he did it outside of practice when he was eating breakfast, right? He constantly was rehearsing in his mind what the absolutely perfect execution of a swim meet would be. And that's part of why he became so incredibly successful, because by the time it actually came for him to get in the pool, his brain had already charted a course for how it needed to magnificently apply itself to the craft, okay? And that's what's very important. It's the difference between simply reacting to the swim meet versus intentionally designing how you're going to go about the swim meet. And that's why he became such a master at things. They also did a study with 3 different groups of basketball players. And here's what they did, because they wanted to test how powerful this was. So what they did is they wanted to see how much people could improve their free throw ability over time. So they had one group that practiced by actually, shooting the free throws. Okay, they just did that. They had one group that practiced the free throws and visualized themselves, sinking excellent free throw shots continuously. They had them actively visualize that. And then they had one group that just visualized it. Now, the question is, which group do you think did the best? You might be inclined to say group 1 or group 2, but it actually was group 3. Literally the group that just visualized themselves perfectly executing a free throw shot were the ones that ended up improving their performance over the long run. Now that might seem like mind-blowing. It was to me when I first got that. You're saying, wait a minute, I can actually become better just visualizing myself being better as opposed to even just practicing. It seems so counterintuitive, but I'm telling you, there's a real power in getting the entirety of your subconscious involved in the process of becoming a master. And when you visualize yourself executing something magnificently, you adjust the neurochemical combination in your brain to become that much more acutely aware of what has to happen when it actually is showtime. So you've got to ingrain this in a regular part of your process. I'm telling you, it's very important. Now, the next thing that you need to do is exercise deliberate practice on a daily basis. Now, if it isn't clear already, you're going to have to practice a lot. There is no, silver bullet, very quick way to attain mastery in any skill. The reality is, if you had any idea how much time people actually sunk into their craft to become masters, it would almost not seem, that impressive, because they're doing that much work. If you're familiar with the work of Malcolm Gladwell, he helped uncover the fact that if you want to become a master in a particular field, most of those individuals had spent 10,000 hours practicing their specific craft. Now, you can shrink that period of time a little bit by using what's called deliberate practice. So what we mean by deliberate practice is to have a specific outcome and intention applied to your practicing. So let's take the example of guitar. If you were just practicing guitar, you might just play around on the guitar. You might say, okay, yeah, I'm going to practice, but you may not have a strategy, you may not have an agenda, you may not have a regimen of how you're actually going to become better. Versus if you find a coach and a mentor, they're going to be able to help provide structure, clarity, and direction for you so that you're actually going to be able to zero in on mastering those underlying principles, right? You need to be able to tell yourself, okay, I really need to be better at my sweeping strategy with my strings, okay? So all I'm going to do is I'm going to spend an hour just focusing on that. That is to have deliberate practice. That's what that means. So it's you zeroing in on moving the needle in each one of those little areas so that you can have that dedicated outcome when you're applying yourself to your practice, and you can get that sense of victory as you make those sizable adjustments, as opposed to just randomly practicing, which is going to take you much longer to achieve mastery. Now, finally, number 6, you need to keep the concept alive. Now, here's what I mean by this, and this comes from Robert Greene's book called Mastery, which again, I highly recommend. Now, what he shares about in that book is the fact that most people who are embarking on mastering a skill will pick it up for a little while, they'll learn it a little bit, they'll sink their teeth in a little while, And then maybe they get discouraged, maybe they get bored, or maybe they just realize this is going to take a whole hell of a lot of work, and they put it down. And they think that they're going to pick it back up sometime very soon, but they put it down and they tuck it away. And the problem with that is if these compartments of your brain are not actively being stretched to master this skill, they are atrophying daily. And so you have to make sure that you keep the concept alive, that you keep it living and breathing. And this is what even current masters of their field know, is they've perpetually got to keep pushing the boundary of what they already know so that they can continuously improve and continuously get better. It's the only way to actually achieve mastery. So don't fall prey to the idea of, I'm going to practice for 3 months, I'm going to take a month off, and then I'm going to pick it back up, because you're going to have a lot of work to do to get yourself back to where you originally left off. Always keep it alive and create a system where you're going to be able to deliberately practice on a regular basis. That's going to be what's really important here. So I hope you found this valuable. 6 steps to master any skill. My next video that I have coming to you is going to be an exciting one. It's on 4 questions that you're going to be able to ask yourself in order to create complete inner peace of mind. So if you're dealing with stress or anxiety, that's going to be a very important one to check out. I hope that you enjoy it. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. But until now, go out there and start mastering your skill. You know what you need to master. You now know the steps you need to take. So take some action. Please write to me, leave a comment, shoot me a message on social media. I'd love to know, what skill are you trying to master right now and how can I help? Go out there, be purposeful, be passionate, and live intentionally and live your most extraordinary life. Take care.